All right, so today we're gonna really get into the show, Get Millie Black.
Okay.
It's on HBO and Channel 4. It
Yeah.
seems like it's the show that everybody is talking about, so we figured we would dive in and give our take.
For sure.
And we have a whole bunch of sources for this one. We have reviews, we have interviews,
Right.
we have even some academic articles that are looking at this show.
Yeah.
So this should be a really interesting one to kind of dig into. And I think something that's interesting right off the bat is that this is not your typical detective drama.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things that has people really excited about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that's really fascinating is that it's created by Marlon James,
Mm-hmm.
who,
Yes.
won the Booker Prize for his writing.
Yes.
He's a novelist.
An amazing author.
Yes. And he's really using this as a platform to kind of challenge people's perceptions of Jamaica.
Yeah, so for people who haven't started watching yet, the basic premise is that Millie Black is a detective, and she returns to her hometown in Jamaica to investigate this missing person case.
Okay.
But it seems like it gets a lot deeper than that.
It does. It goes way beyond just, the surface level of like solving a crime.
Right.
It really digs into the social realities of Jamaica
Yeah.
and forces us to confront
Yeah.
like the legacy of colonialism,
Oh.
social justice. All of these different issues are woven into.
It's interesting, too, because critics are really taking notice, like they're praising this show
Oh, yeah.
for its authenticity, for this really interesting narrative structure where
Yeah.
we hear different characters' perspectives through voiceovers and
Yeah.
the fresh perspective it brings to a genre that I think a lot of times can feel kind of predictable.
Absolutely. And I think that's part of what makes this show so compelling is that you have these different points of view. We're not just getting the, standard detective's point of view or the victim's point of view. We're getting all of these different characters and how they're perceiving
Right.
what's going on. And I think that makes it so that the viewer becomes more active. They're having to piece together the story themselves
Yeah.
and figure out, okay, well, what's the truth here?
I like that.
Because, we're getting all of this conflicting information.
So it's really making you think.
Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned earlier all these different layers, and I'm really curious how those connect to what James is trying to do with the show.
Yeah.
Because it seems like he's aiming for something much deeper than just like
Right.
a typical whodunit,
Absolutely.
Right.
He's not just trying to entertain. He's trying to really, make a statement.
Yeah.
And he's talked a lot about wanting to show the complexities of Jamaica,
Okay.
moving away from just like tourist brochures
Right.
or just stories about crime, which is often how Jamaica's portrayed.
Yeah.
And, his own background being Jamaican and being a queer man is woven into this show.
It's interesting you say that because even the choice to set it in Jamaica, it's like
Yes.
it becomes more than just a setting. It's like,
It's part of the story.
yeah, it's part of like exploring what it means to be Jamaican.
Yeah.
Like, what is it like to kind of grapple with the history of the island,
Right.
but also the present of the island.
Exactly.
And like how those things kind of intersect.
Yeah, and it's interesting how he uses the characters and the dialogue
Mm-hmm.
to kind of explore those themes of identity.
Yeah.
Like, for example, he uses Jamaican patois in the show.
Right.
And it's not just like sprinkled in there for like, oh, this is authentic.
Right.
It's like an integral part of how the characters
Yeah.
interact with each other.
Yes.
And how they relate to each other and how they see themselves.
It's like he's really trying to give space to those voices and like those ways of speaking that are often marginalized. And then we get to Millie Black, who is, like you were saying, not your typical detective.
Not at all.
She's flawed, she's complex,
Yes.
and sometimes like not even that likable,
Right.
which I think is part of what makes her so interesting.
Right, because she's a real person.
Yeah.
She's not just this like, perfect hero.
Right.
She's got issues. She's got baggage.
Yeah, you can totally sense that she's carrying like the weight of her past.
Yeah.
And she's trying to figure out who she is and where she belongs.
Exactly. And there's this one scene where she's talking to another character and she kind of switches back and forth between,
Oh, yeah.
speed in a more standard English accent and then using patois.
Wow.
And that's a really interesting example of how she's code switching,
Okay.
depending on who she's with.
Interesting.
And that really speaks to that idea of, identity being fluid.
Yeah.
And how we present ourselves differently.
Yeah.
Depending on the social context.
Like she's navigating these different worlds almost.
Exactly.
And trying to like figure out how to be herself in each of them.
Yeah.
And then you have Hibiscus, who brings this whole other layer of complexity to the show.
Oh, absolutely. Hibiscus is a trans woman. And she is navigating a society that can be very hostile, towards trans people.
Yeah.
And she represents this incredible resilience in the face of adversity. And China McQueen, who plays Hibiscus, has talked about how important this role is, in terms of challenging stereotypes about trans people and showing the reality of what it's like to be a queer person in Jamaica.
It's so important to see these stories.
Absolutely.
Like being told, and these voices being like amplified, especially in a context where they've been so often silenced or like pushed to the margins.
And I think that's one of the things that James is trying to do with the show is to highlight this community, the Gully Queens.
And for people who maybe aren't familiar with that term, could you explain a little bit?
Yeah, so the Gully Queens are a group of LGBTQ individuals in Jamaica who face a lot of discrimination. And they've kind of formed this community where they can support each other and, find solace. And they're incredibly resilient.
Yeah.
And they're really a symbol of
powerful
resistance and strength in the face of this adversity that they're facing.
Wow. That's amazing.
It is.
It's so interesting how he's using the show to kind of shed light on this community that so often is overlooked or misrepresented.
Absolutely.
And it's not just about their struggles, but it's about their humanity.
Right.
It's about their joy, their capacity for love and connection.
It's about celebrating their lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, and it ties into a larger theme I think that the show is dealing with, which is the lasting impact of colonialism on Jamaican society.
So it's not just about historical events. It's about how those events...
It's about how it's still affecting people today. It's in the social structures. It's in the way people see themselves.
So colonialism is not just something in the past. It's like an ongoing force.
It's an ongoing force.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's heavy.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about like Millie's journey back to Jamaica.
Right.
It's almost like a metaphor for that exploration of the past.
Yeah.
And how it like still has this grip on the present.
Yeah.
I remember that scene where she goes to visit the ruins of her old school.
Oh, yeah.
Which was like the symbol of colonial authority. And it's all like crumbling and overgrown. And it's like
the past is literally haunting the present.
Yeah. And Millie, who like grew up in Jamaica, but then was sent away to England. Right. Like she represents that disconnect.
Yeah. That yearning to belong.
Yeah.
In a place that's both familiar and foreign at the same time.
And her investigation into this missing person case, it's like...
It's all intertwined.
Yeah, it becomes intertwined with her own personal search for identity.
Yeah, her search for belonging, her search for who she is.
Like those two journeys are like mirroring each other almost.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's where I think the show's narrative structure really shines. Because we're getting all these different voices from the past and present, and it creates this really complex understanding of what it's like to be Jamaican.
It's really cool how he kind of weaves it all together.
Yeah.
We haven't talked much about like the language of the show.
Right.
And how it uses Jamaican patois.
Yeah.
It's really striking how authentic it feels.
Yeah. It's not just about being accurate. It's about being respectful. It's about letting these characters express themselves in their own voice in a way that feels genuine and empowering.
And it really adds to like the authenticity of the show, I think.
Yeah,
it like really helps immerse you in that world.
Yeah.
But it also feels like a deliberate choice.
Oh, yeah.
Like a statement about representation.
It's like he's challenging this idea that stories from the Caribbean need to be told in a way that caters to like a Western audience.
It's like, this is our story.
Yes.
This is our language.
This is how we speak.
This is our culture.
Yeah.
And we're going to tell it.
On our own terms.
On our own terms. Yeah. And in doing that, it's not just entertaining this. It's like inviting us to engage with a different way of seeing the world.
Yeah. A different way of understanding identity and belonging.
And that brings us back to those themes we talked about earlier,
Yeah.
Identity colonialism and social justice. Like, this show is really grappling with those issues head on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's not shying away from anything.
It's making us confront some uncomfortable truths.
Yeah, it's asking us to think about how the past is still affecting the present.
Yeah.
And how these systems of oppression are still impacting marginalized communities.
And how people are navigating those complexities in their own lives.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
And it's doing all of that while also being visually stunning.
Yes.
I mean, the cinematography is incredible.
It's beautiful.
It's like you're really transported to Jamaica.
Yeah, the way they use light and shadow.
Yeah.
And, like, the colors are so vibrant.
Yes.
And then those, like, sweeping shots of the countryside.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
It's so captivating.
It is.
I was thinking about that scene where Millie and Hibiscus.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a perfect example of how they use those visuals.
Yes.
To convey emotion. You know, and to create this sense of intimacy between the characters. It's not just about what they're saying.
Right.
It's about how the camera is framing them, how the light is hitting their faces, you know, the music that's playing.
It's all those details that make it feel
so real,
so immersive. Like you're not just watching it, you're like experiencing it alongside them, you know?
You're feeling what they're feeling.
Yeah.
And that's part of what makes the show so impactful, I think.
Absolutely.
It's not just entertaining, it's like emotionally resonant.
Yeah, it stays with you.
It really does.
Long after you've finished watching it.
Yeah.
And it makes you think differently about the world.
Yeah.
And about yourself.
Yeah.
And about the stories that we tell and the stories that need to be told.
It definitely challenges you to confront your own assumptions.
For sure.
About a place like Jamaica, which is so often portrayed in such a one-dimensional way.
Right. And I think a lot of critics have talked about how Get Millie Black is really a conversation starter.
Okay.
You know, it's not a show that gives you easy answers. It raises questions. It sparks debates.
Yeah.
It makes you grapple with these really complex issues of race.
Right.
Gender sexuality.
Yeah.
The legacies of colonialism.
It makes you think like, okay, as a creator,
Yeah.
what's your responsibility when you're telling stories about cultures and communities that are different from your own? How do you balance that authenticity with the need to entertain?
Yeah, that's a huge question.
That's a huge question.
Especially in today's world.
And I think the fact that the show is being so well received really speaks to the power of that approach.
Yeah, people are responding to it because it feels so authentic.
Yeah.
It feels so real.
Yeah.
And it feels so unapologetically Jamaican.
Yeah.
You know? And that's what makes it so groundbreaking.
Yeah.
It's not just a good crime drama. It's a cultural touchstone.
Yeah.
It's pushing boundaries. It's making us think differently about the stories we consume.
Right.
And the stories we demand. So
if you're looking for a show that's going to stay with you, that's going to make you think. That's going to challenge your assumptions.
Absolutely.
Get Millie Black is definitely worth checking out.
It's a must-watch.
Yeah.
If you want something that's, you know, going to really make you think.
Right.
And that has these compelling characters.
Yeah.
And that's not afraid to tackle.
Yeah.
Difficult issues.
So that's the end of our deep dive into Get Millie Black.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
We talked about the plot,
the characters,
the themes,
the cultural impact.
I mean, this show is really something special.
It is.
But I think the conversation doesn't have to end here.
No, I encourage everyone to seek out the show.
Yes.
Form your own opinions.
Yeah.
And keep engaging with the ideas that it raises.
Because at the end of the day, the most powerful deep dive is the one that you take yourself.
Absolutely.
So go watch the show.
Yeah.
And let us know what you think.
Yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, it feels like James is using the show to really kind of like highlight this community that's often overlooked or like misrepresented.
It's about, you know, their humanity.
Yeah.
It's not just about their struggles. It's about their capacity for joy and love and connection.
Yeah, and that kind of ties into, I think, a bigger theme that the show's exploring, which is like the impact of colonialism on Jamaican society.
It's like a wound that hasn't healed.
Yeah, so it's not just about like historical events, it's about how those events are still...
It's still affecting people today.
Wow.
You know, it's in the social structures, the way people see themselves.
So colonialism isn't just like something in the past, it's like...
It's an ongoing force.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's kind of heavy.
It is.
I'm thinking about Millie's journey back to Jamaica.
Right.
It's almost like a metaphor for that like exploration of the past.
Absolutely.
And how it's still so present.
Yeah.
You know, I remember that scene where she goes to visit like the ruins of her old school.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like this symbol of colonial authority. And it's like all crumbling and overgrown. And it's just like...
The past is haunting the present.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Millie, who grew up in Jamaica but was then like sent away to England as a kid.
Right.
It's like she represents that disconnect.
Yeah, that yearning to belong.
Yeah.
You know, in a place that's both familiar and foreign.
Right. And it's interesting how her investigation into this missing person case,
it's
like it becomes intertwined with her own personal search for identity.
Absolutely. It's all connected.
Yeah.
You know, it's her search for belonging.
Right.
Their search for who she is.
That those two journeys are mirroring each other.
Exactly. And that's where I think the show's narrative structure is so effective.
Okay.
Because we're getting all these different voices from the past and the present.
Yeah.
And it just creates this like really layered and complex understanding of
what it means to be Jamaican.
What it means to be Jamaican.
Yeah. And, you know, we haven't talked much about like the language of the show.
Right.
How it uses Jamaican patois. Like it's so striking how authentic it feels.
It's not just about being accurate. You know, it's about being respectful.
Yeah.
It's about letting these characters express themselves in their own voice.
Yeah.
And in a way that feels, you know, genuine and empowering.
Yeah. It definitely like adds to the authenticity of the show.
Absolutely.
It helps to immerse you in that world.
Yeah.
But it also feels like a deliberate choice.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like a statement about representation.
It's like he's saying, you know, we don't need to tell these stories in a way that caters to a Western audience.
Yeah. It's like
this is our story.
It is our language.
This is our culture.
This is how we speak.
And we're going to tell it
on our own terms.
On our own terms. Yeah. And by doing that, it's like he's inviting us to engage with like a different way of seeing the world.
A different way of understanding identity and belonging.
And that brings us back to those themes we talked about before, like identity, colonialism, social justice.
Yeah.
This show is like really
head on.
Yeah, confronting those issues.
Absolutely. It's not shying away from the hard stuff.
And making us confront some uncomfortable truths.
Yeah, it's asking us to think about, you know, how the past is still impacting the present.
Right. How these systems of oppression are still, you know, affecting people.
Yeah.
How are people navigating these really complex realities?
It's so powerful.
It is.
And it's doing all of this while also being, like, visually stunning.
Oh, my gosh. The cinematography is incredible.
That's so beautiful.
I mean, it's like you are transported to Jamaica.
The way they use, like, light and shadow.
Yeah.
And the colors are so vibrant.
Yes.
And then, like, those sweeping shots of the countryside.
Gorgeous.
It's just so captivating.
Yeah.
I remember thinking about that scene with Millie and Hibiscus, where they are...
It's a great example.
Of how they use those visuals to, like, convey emotion.
To create intimacy.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just about what they're saying. It's about how the camera is framing them.
Yeah.
How the light is hitting their faces. The music that's playing in the background.
It's all those little details that make it feel...
so real.
So immersive. Like,
yeah, you're right there with them.
Yep. You're not just watching it, you're like experiencing it.
Exactly.
You're feeling what they're feeling.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes it so impactful.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just entertaining.
It's emotionally resonant.
Yeah, it stays with you.
It makes you think.
For sure.
You know, long after you finish watching it.
It really does.
It makes you think differently about the world.
Yeah.
About yourself.
Yeah.
About the stories we tell.
Right.
The stories that need to be told.
Yeah, it really makes you kind of think about your own assumptions about a place like Jamaica.
Right. And I think a lot of people have said that this show is a conversation starter.
Yeah.
You know, it's not giving you answers.
Yeah.
It's asking questions.
Yeah.
It's sparking these debates about race and gender and, you know, sexuality and colonialism and all these things.
It makes you think, like, as a creator, what is your responsibility?
Right.
When you're telling stories about cultures that are different from your own.
How do you do it right?
Right. How do you balance that authenticity?
Right. How do you balance the authenticity and the need to entertain?
That's a huge question.
Yeah.
And I think that the fact that the show is doing so well really speaks to the power of that approach.
Yeah.
Like, people are responding to it because it feels authentic.
Yeah.
It feels real.
Yeah.
And it feels unapologetically Jamaican.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it so groundbreaking.
Yeah.
You know? It's not just a good crime drama. It's like a cultural touchstone.
Yeah.
It's pushing boundaries.
Yeah.
And making us think differently about the stories we consume and the stories that we demand.
So if you are looking for a show that's going to stay with you, that's going to make you think.
Make you think.
That's going to challenge your assumptions.
Challenge what you think, you know.
Get Millie Black is definitely worth checking out.
Oh, absolutely. It's a must-watch.
It really is.
For anyone who appreciates, you know, complex storytelling.
Right.
Compelling character. In a show that's not afraid to tackle these, like, big issues.
So we've reached the end of our deep dive into Get Millie Black.
We've covered a lot.
I feel like we've really unpacked a lot.
The plot, the characters,
themes, the cultural impact.
And the impact.
I mean, it's clear that this show is really something special.
It is.
But the conversation doesn't have to end here.
No. I encourage everyone to go watch it.
Yeah.
Form your own opinions.
Yeah.
Keep thinking about it.
Keep talking about it.
I'm talking about it.
Because ultimately, the most powerful deep dive is the one that you take yourself.
Absolutely.
So go watch the show.
Yes.
And let us know what you think.